Good morning from Fast Company. Here's our daily look into what's driving today's creative business leaders. Forget job hunting, Gen Z is growth hunting, by Jeff LeBlanc. When I talk with business leaders about Gen Z, the same frustration often bubbles up. They won't stay. It's said with a kind of bewildering shrug, as if the younger generation has suddenly rewritten the rules out of thin air. I heard it again last week during a radio segment I did about generational dynamics at work. The host asked why Gen Z feels so comfortable moving on so quickly. Here's what I've learned after a decade teaching them, coaching them, and watching them navigate the workplace. Gen Z doesn't think they're doing anything unusual. And frankly, once you look at the data, it's hard to argue with them. A new Youngstown State University study of 1,000 full-time U.S. professionals found that nearly half of Gen Z workers are already planning to leave their jobs, not for higher pay, but for better growth. That is the highest rate of all generations surveyed. It's not impulsiveness, it's not disloyalty, it's something far more reasonable. It's growth hunting. What companies assume and what's actually happening. There's a familiar script about young workers. They're too quick to leave, too impatient, too everything. That narrative has been around for so long that many leaders use it as the default explanation without thinking. But when nearly 1 out of 2 early career workers say they can't picture a future where they are, that points to something systemic, not personal. Here's what the data actually shows. 86% of Gen Z say they won't pursue upskilling unless their employer helps pay for it. That's not a lack of drive. That's the reality of trying to build a career while carrying historic student debt and paying rent that climbs faster than wages. 43% say they're too burnt out to take on education outside of work. That's not an excuse. That's a sign that the modern workload has pushed people to their limit long before you ever ask them to add night classes. And 76% say the main thing blocking their advancement is cost. Not interest, not effort, not ambition, cost. Taken together, the message is straightforward. This generation isn't avoiding responsibility, they're asking employers to share it. Why growth hunting makes sense right now. Older generations built careers around staying put and climbing step by step. That path made sense when wages matched living costs and companies offered predictable ladders. Gen Z is coming of age in a completely different economy. Careers don't unfold in neat lines anymore. Skills expire quickly. Entire industries shift in a few years, and the price of staying competitive keeps climbing. So Gen Z does the logical thing. They move toward the places where they can grow. They're not chasing titles, they're chasing momentum. Every semester, I watch students who are smart, thoughtful, and deeply motivated figure out how to build a career in a landscape that changes constantly. They're not waiting for permission, but they will absolutely walk if an employer refuses to invest in them. And honestly, that's rational. Growth hunting is not about impatience, it's about survival. The leadership myth that keeps repeating. For years, companies have preached the language of development and continuous learning. They've told young employees to take initiative, expand their skills, stay ahead. Gen Z listened, and now they want to know why the bill for that development keeps landing on their doorstep. You can't ask workers to level up and then close the door to the support they need to do it. You can't talk about retention and then offer no path forward. You can't position upskilling as essential and then make it unaffordable. This is where the generational disconnect becomes obvious. Companies say they want a future-ready workforce. Gen Z is asking them to mean it. A cultural standoff that was bound to happen. This feels like the moment where the values of Gen Z and the habits of corporate culture finally collide. Not because Gen Z is rebelling, but because they're taking organizations at their word. If you say you value growth, you have to create it. If you say you care about development, you have to invest in it. Otherwise, Gen Z will simply walk towards someone who does. And here's the twist. They don't feel guilty about it. They're not sneaking out the back door. They're leaving through the front, head high, because the expectations were never mutual to begin with. What employers can do. This doesn't require an overhaul, it just takes intention. And while every organization is different, here are a few approaches that can make a real difference. Put money behind upskilling. Even partial funding shifts the relationship. Make advancement transparent. When people have to guess, they eventually stop trying. Tackle burnout before talking development. Growth can't happen when people are running on empty. Promote based on readiness rather than time served. Tenure alone doesn't tell you who's capable. Ask employees what growth actually means to them. The answers are often more practical than leaders expect. These aren't the only step, but they're a meaningful start, and they're far more achievable than most leaders realize. The future belongs to the growth hunters. Gen Z isn't running from work, they're running toward growth. They know what it costs to stay still, and they're not willing to pay that price. Not anymore. They aren't rejecting the workplace, they're asking it to evolve with them. When employers offer real development, this generation will show up with incredible commitment. When they don't, Gen Z moves on with the same honesty and clarity they bring to everything else. That clarity is a gift, if leaders choose to use it. Because building a workplace where people can grow isn't just good for Gen Z, it's good for everyone. That's all today from Fast Company. Talk to you tomorrow.
SpokenLayer.